PDX Ruby. Well, thank you to Elemental for hosting us this month. Yeah, and pizza and beer. If you didn't get it, I assume it's in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Back in the back. And if you need restrooms, they're back in that way too. And if let's see, the Wi-Fi. That's the Elemental guest one, right?
Yeah.
It's,
These green cubes.
Yes, so a couple things. We'll do the OS Bridge raffle tonight. So we have one ticket to raffle for the Open Source Bridge Conference, which I will tell you a little bit more about. So this is the URL here. If you wanted to enter that, I haven't figured out how I'm going to draw the name, but we'll figure that out.
Electronically.
Could do that. Yeah.
Do we have to be, is it happening tonight?
Yeah, I'm gonna do it tonight, but not right now. I think that instructions say you can enter till 8, so we will give people time to enter. And then also thanks to Elemental, we're going to record the meeting talks. But if you want to take notes, I started an Etherpad that anyone can join and take notes, so we can share those. Let's see, a couple announcements. Here's Elemental's website. If nobody knows about Caligator, if nobody knows. If somebody doesn't know about Caligator, then you should know. That's where to find out about things, events, tech events in Portland. I met somebody at RailsConf last week who didn't know about Caligator, so there's always people learning about it.
That means there's 5 left. So 5
I think I found a RailsConf too, so there's 4.
There's 4 left, okay? They're going quick. Find somebody who doesn't know and pull them in.
So upcoming events, we have a ton of Ruby events. Every Tuesday there's a Ruby event. Usually it's at Crowd Compass. Next week we have a Hack and Help session. There's also the Ruby Beginner meeting once a month. I noticed that Portland Code School is doing an Intro to Ruby bootcamp.
Oh, we are?
Well, according to Caligator, you are.
Sorry, that's been canceled.
Oh! Is that right? Okay.
No one has. That's good.
Should I delete this?
I would edit it to say canceled because once people see the announcement or something.
Well, I'll go back and edit to
I didn't
say
realize
canceled.
Erica had put that on there.
Okay. Well, now I know. There's also a Ruby lunch for people who are downtown, want to go downtown for lunch once a month, talk about Ruby. Open Source Bridge is a conference in June. Registration is open. We actually have our schedule now, don't we?
Yes.
And with speakers lined up. Let's see what that does. And yeah, it's 3 days of scheduled talks, and then the 4th day of unconference. So it'll be our 5th year, so very exciting.
Okay. See, you get to start off right after the keynote.
There's going to be another Ruby conference in Portland. I don't think they know where or when yet, but they're working on it.
Does Ben still need help figuring out when and where?
He was talking about that last week, so
probably.
Yeah.
So
he was there
do we-
scouting venues last week.
Okay. Do we have a way to get people who want from here who want to help with Cascadia Ruby in touch with him? Just Twitter?
Well, there's their Twitter account, Cascadia Ruby. Looks like their email is us@cascadiaruby.com. So.
Okay. Just to say that Ben doesn't actually live in Portland anymore, so you might want more help from locals.
Yes. There was also, Reed, we met some people from the Ashland area who are doing a Ruby conference.
Yes, there's going to be a Road Rails conference
Road Rails?
sometime in October, I think.
Yeah,
They're
I
still
think so.
firming up.
I thought they just set the date.
They may have
Did
said
they?
that. They said they were trying to.
Okay, I didn't find their website, so we'll do that.
So we're actually in Jacksonville.
Yeah, what else? Also, I have eagle pins that Davey helped make, so if anybody wants those pins that we had at RailsConf, and they have familiar cats that Audrey's cat, Marianne's cat, Davey's cats, so I have those. And I think think those are all my announcements. So, are there any other announcements people wanted to say about events coming up, or Chuck?
Do we know what the Wi-Fi password is?
It's on the green cubes. You should grab a green cube and do what it says.
Welcome to Elemental. Capitalize the words as in first letter of each word and no spaces.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'll go. All right. So it's not strictly a Ruby thing. It's the Sister Society. We're doing another meeting at the end of May, May 30th. It's January. And we still have some slots open.
And what exactly is?
Yeah, I'm getting to the part where I realize that half the room doesn't know what I'm talking about. Or more.
That's the same thing when you get there, actually.
There's no cure. So, anyway, Sister Society, it's for discussing and learning about kind of the weird offbeat programming languages, things that people have forgotten about, or only 3 people in the world knew about, or whatever. It's sort of out there, intended to be an out there type of learning experience. And yeah, so that's what that is.
Last time I remember a really good drawing of a platypus, right? There might have been a programming language, but there was definitely a
Yeah,
platypus.
platypus. I can't
Yes.
promise any future platypuses.
Can you say the name of it as a little star?
It's the Zisu Society.
Like
Okay,
Steve-
spell that, please.
Zissou. It's a riff on The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, which is a Wes Anderson film. Anyway,
The full
I know
name.
that.
the weirdness is intended from the title or of the
Well, what's the
group,
full?
There it is.
so. It's the Zissou Society for Programming Language Exploration.
All
Thank
right.
you very much.
Here it is.
That helps explain.
See?
Bill?
I don't know how many of you saw the keynote address that Yehuda Katz gave at the RailsConf. I saw it, and I want to just mention to everybody that it looked a lot to me like a roadmap of where Ruby on Rails is going in the future, and I commend it to everybody. It was entertaining, it was enlightening. I think it was insightful. I think it's something that you wouldn't regret spending your time having a look at when it gets on YouTube.
Do we might already be in conference.
Sorry?
Do we all have to learn Ember now?
Actually, it was fairly neutral with regard to Ember specifically, although it was certainly oriented towards how JavaScript and Ruby are going to have to play nicely together. Yeah.
Most of the talks seem to be up on Conference.
Yeah.
Or a lot of them, at least the more popular ones are. I don't know exactly how to find them, but just links from tweets and stuff, but you can find them.
Oh, which reminds me, Sandy Metz's
Yep.
talk on the
I
magic
watched
tricks of test.
Oh,
Magic tricks of testing was excellent. I highly recommend it.
Mike?
I guess a couple other tech events. Tomorrow night at January, just a few blocks towards the river, we have PDX Scala, which might not seem Ruby related, but it works great with JRuby. And then Monday night, there also is the functional programming user group, which we were trying to emphasize more accessible intro material this time, I guess.
Oh, good.
But also someone is presenting on Panda, which might be relevant to tonight's talks, I guess, also.
Cool. All right. Audrey? Okay, we have Audrey go. Do you want to connect?
I want to set my laptop down so I have notes, but I don't
Okay.
need to put them on the screen unless people want to. Yeah. So I asked Kirsten if we could have some time at the start of the meeting to talk about Igal, because Igal Koshevoy was the de facto leader of this group from late 2007 onward, and he died last month. And I wanted to tell you all how Igal came to lead this group, because it's kind of an interesting story, and it reflects the character of the group in a lot of ways. So you may not realize this, but nobody nominated him. It was there was actually a lot of resistance to the idea that we needed a leader. There might still be. It's sort of this has been an interesting group. So toward the end of 2006. And I never asked him exactly how he came, how he found out about the group or how he started following it. But he got on the mailing list and started answering questions in this great, verbose, detailed, enthusiastic, helpful way. And 2006, 2007, Rails was getting popular. Rails was becoming a thing that people were using for their work. And at Barcamp in the spring of 2007, Yigal gave a talk about scaling Rails, which was a really hot topic at the time. Raise your hand if you remember how much it was a hot topic. It was like, so yeah, so he did that. And he started coming to meetings, and he started, I guess, thinking about how our meetings were going. And they weren't going very well at the time, because we were meeting at Free Geek, and nobody was in charge of scheduling anything, and nobody was in charge of announcing anything, and nobody was in charge of kicking meetings off. And so what this resulted in was a system where the people who knew that there was going to be a meeting every month would just show up. And everybody else would get on the mailing list and ask, is there a meeting this month? And you can guess what that does for attendance and participation, right? If everybody's sitting around going, are we actually meeting? Is there even a user group? It doesn't help people get involved.
It was in the low teens.
we got a dozen people on a regular basis, no problem, but sometimes we had 30, and people started asking, how do we get 30 every time? I think there's more than 30 right now.
Yeah, 42.
42, you counted, okay. So in October of 2007, Yigal had been working on a system called Automated, which was a configuration management system like Puppet or Chef. I'm not sure Chef even actually existed at the time. But he had been doing some work with this and decided to encapsulate what he had learned and turn it into this thing. And he offered to give a talk. But he didn't just offer to give a talk. He offered to give a talk on Automated, to find a new venue for that talk, and to announce it to the mailing list. And so we ended up meeting at CubeSpace, which was a co-working space. They closed a couple of years ago. But CubeSpace had really wanted to have more user groups in there, and Yigal heard that and thought, well, at Free Geek, we're always wondering if we're still on their calendar. They seem to have trouble keeping track of us. We have to get a key holder. It's getting complicated, and so maybe it would be better if we moved to CubeSpace. So he just offered, like, how about I give this presentation and I talk to CubeSpace and I'll arrange for us to be there. It's a short walk from the other venue. We'll just go ahead and do this. And then he sent out notes afterward. And then the next month, he did this sort of a thing again. He, sent out an announcement, and there was a meeting, and he sent out notes. And if there wasn't a topic scheduled, then he took notes on what people actually talked about. And he said, hey, turns out it was worthwhile to have a meeting even though we didn't have a scheduled topic. He told the list that. And
we believed him.
And so he kept doing this until the next spring. We had started having these PDX Ruby business meetings, which we just had one again. We'll hopefully do another one maybe later this month or something like that. So the idea of the PDX Ruby business group was that with an organization that has no official structure and no leadership, and really no way of officially doing anything, maybe we at least needed an informal mechanism for communicating about the business of the group. So there was this mailing list. There is this mailing list. And on this mailing list, people discuss topics like our website and our mailing list hosting, and is our website down again? Why, yes, it is, and what should we do about it? And I suggested that maybe we should meet in person instead of just talking on the mailing list about this, so we had our first PDX Ruby business meeting. So out of this, we started having these discussions about, what is this group and where is it going? How do we run it? All of those like big meta structural kinds of questions that are really important to being able to go from having 12 people here to having 42. And I wanted to tell you one of the things that he wrote on the mailing list about this because I had forgotten about it and it just cracked me up. So he said, the Portland Ruby Brigade's anarchist collective model of governance has worked surprisingly well over the years. At its best, we've seen some remarkable ingenuity, altruism, and synergy. At its worst, we get stalemates, angry rants, neglected new people, alienated old members, and meeting attendees stuck sitting silently in a room where no one wants to talk. Do you feel like that now? And so, he started tinkering a little bit more. He, instead of, we would have a little bit of like consensus meeting starting structure, like everyone would sit around, go, okay, you want to start the meeting? Yeah, we could start the meeting, okay. What about, hey, how about we do introductions? Okay, so who are you anyhow? And, when it's 12 people who know each other, you don't need to do introductions. But when it's 30 people who don't know each other, maybe you do. And when it's 42, you can't anymore. It turned out it took us half an hour to get through it once we got past a certain point. But he started actually saying, let's have a little structure. Let's just have a little bit more. And he started actually emceeing the meetings instead of just sending out announcements. And so in spring of 2008, he acknowledged officially that he'd been emceeing the meetings. And
After 2 years?
no, just after, this is about 6 months.
Okay.
So about 6 months in, he acknowledged officially that he'd been doing this. And he had to because he needed somebody to take over for him because he was sick and he was out that month. So it started this discussion on the PDX review business list. And because somebody said, well, do we actually need an MC? You know, we used to get along fine without one. So Eagle responded, it's maybe a little bit long to read it like in its entirety, but he said, here's what happened. When I started announcing meetings and when I started taking notes and publishing notes from the meetings, people assumed I was in charge. People just thought I was. And so they started complaining to me about all the things that weren't working because they thought I was responsible for them. So he decided that it was better to be responsible for them than to just let everybody point the finger and have nothing getting done. And Sam, whose phone is ringing, was also in this discussion thread. And Sam, you pointed out that the growth of Rails had really changed the nature of the group. It had gone from being a bunch of Ruby enthusiasts who tinkered with this in their spare time to a group of Rails professionals who really needed and depended on enough structure to be able to show up new to Rails and learn something and know what they were supposed to do, know that you're allowed to ask questions, know that you're allowed to present, all of these kinds of things. And so Egal being MC allowed the group to go from that small group of people who just kind of, you know, knew they were going to show up every month to talk about Ruby to a group like this that can do what we do now. And so that's what I wanted to share that I learned from Egal, that the structure of the group actually does matter, that if I want to be able to have so many people, I mean people who don't even know me, come and sit here and learn something with me, we need to allow you to do that. And in order to allow you to do that, we have to tell you that there's going to be a meeting, we have to, you know, tell you where it's going to be, we have to tell you how you can participate, so that you're not just guessing and left in the gap there. And I think one of his really special skills was that he could see that happening and he felt like it was his ability and his responsibility to do something like that. Yeah, so it was really fun for me to go back through the mailing list archives and see that if you are in any way interested in how this group runs, there is a PDX review business list, there's discussion on it. You should get on that list. If you don't know how, you should come talk to me afterward. Because I would love to have more people, you know, part of that. We are still, I think somebody described this as the pirate ship with, do you remember it? There was this funny, it was something like this slowly drifting pirate ship with, yeah, some kind of weird anarchist collective at the head. This is still a group that sometimes has leaders and sometimes doesn't, sometimes has structure and sometimes doesn't. It's really up to us to create what we want to have happen here. So if we have a little bit more time, I wanted to invite other people to talk about what they learned from Egal, because I know that he had a huge impact on so many people.
I just had a question.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to forward some of those like pivotal emails to the list?
I could.
I'm so new to the group, I don't actually know any of, like when...
Yeah, I had to be able to remember enough of the timeline to find those again. So yeah, I could probably do something like that.
It'd be really great if there was a place where we could collect that.
Okay, I'll figure out a good way to format it and not make it hard to read. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Cool. Yeah.
I just wanted to point out that it wasn't really an anarchist pirate ship. It was really more of an anarchist pirate rowboat. I don't know if Phil will remember, who was probably the other person who was there. Like, I don't know, 2004, 2005, I remember a particular meeting where we had 4 of us show up, and it was like Lennon and Phil and me and someone else.
Oh dear.
Actually, yeah, it was fairly common. So it was like we all fit in the rowboat. And we didn't really need to, you know, make decisions, and we, you know, whoever showed up
and so if somebody new showed up, you did introductions because you didn't know the new person, and it's polite to,
So, but I remember going to a meeting, one of the early meetings that Egal coordinated, and I was like, all right, he's taken over the ship in the best of ways. Like, it really felt really good, and kind of taking all those possibilities that existed and really like making them concrete, you know, and possible for other people to be involved, and you know, and certainly solved most of the problems of like, oh, I don't know, should we meet this month? Which I can't remember why we started doing that, but there was some semi-reasonable, like.
I think the group had just gotten big enough. Free Geek was unavailable a couple of times, and the group had gotten just big enough that people didn't have that sense of certainty.
Yeah.
Like, well, yeah, sure, of course we're meeting, you know?
Right.
There wasn't always
Yeah.
a projector.
Oh, yeah,
Yes,
that was
the projector
ongoing,
problem was,
right, that
was
was-
It was
ongoing.
like this huge thing. So.
Like 30 years old.
Yeah. But I mean, I want to say I was suspicious at the beginning of all this because I thought, really, we're doing fine, right? You know, I'm here. I figured out how to participate. What are you talking about? I learned, right? And I'm really glad that things went the way they did. Yeah. But yeah,
Couple of things. My wife and I retired in the early 2000s and had moved out of the U.S. And then she decided that although I could continue doing software from a tropical paradise, she's a hardware engineer, and you can't just develop new chips in the wilderness, even though you can contribute to open source just fine. So we moved back to the States. And I was not sure whether I wanted to get re-involved in not or not. And I was kind of, yeah, you know, maybe, whatever. And the first technical person that I met to actually meet in the Portland area was Egal. And within 15 minutes, I was starting to be connected to people and to things. And it kind of wasn't a choice anymore because you would be interested in this, and you should talk to. So what did you? Oh yes, you did that. Well, this what are you talking about? And could you present on that? And and it's like, I guess I'm back in. And that has shaped the last 5 years of my life. It really has had an enormous impact in me setting down roots in the Pacific Northwest, which I had not actually expected to do.
I think you really hit it on the head, Audrey, that he was the first guy that he saw somebody new, he'd be like, how you doing? Hey, you know, what are you into? What's your thing?
And
I'm pretty new to town, and he did the exact same thing to me. And that's how I remember him. I didn't know him very well, but except for a couple of nights.
The second thing was coming out of a what was it? It was a coding thing of some sort. And the funny thing is, at the time, the code and what we were working on was all important. And then it comes time for lunch, and we're going to go, and suddenly the code's not there, and we're having to deal with other people. And I know stereotypes are bad, but this was a bunch of coders. None of us remembered each other's names, okay? We had no idea who this person we've been sitting, because we were introduced 2 hours ago, and since then it was code. And it was very awkward, and at just the point where I became aware of the awkwardness, Egal emitted the most it was like, you see somebody do a hack in code, right? He did a social hack, run-on sentence that went something like, wow, Bob, you know, Sam and I were working on this. What were you and Tony working on? Okay, we should really think of where to watch. Carol, you're a vegetarian, and Sandy, you do whatever. And Marcus, you don't like Thai food. Maybe we should go to this place. John, do you know of any? And gave us all of our names. It was one family. It totally felt completely natural. And I'm going, no, I'm sorry, I know nerds. Nothing feels that complete. That was engineered. You knew what was going on, and I caught his eye, and he winked at me. Because I'm looking at him like slack-jawed. And he's like, yep. And then we just moved on, and we found something that met everyone's dietary preferences. And a couple of times, he was just doing everybody's name and just worked it in really smoothly. So those are the two upsides.
Yeah.
The downside that I want to say is that I had an argument with Egal a couple of months ago because he was saying he took responsibility for the group. it's really important to take responsibility for things. I think it's a shallow and meaningless life if you don't. But it's also really important to not let it all come down on your shoulders. And to not feel like the choice is the weight of the world or completely you can't engage. And I really feel uncomfortable criticizing the dead. But I also really wish that EGAL had not taken everything as seriously as he did. And so I think we should all accept the example. EGAL gave us a great example, except on one thing. Don't ever take it too seriously. Just always realize it's all a big joke, and you can just laugh at it and move on.
Are we at time?
No, I had something to say about it.
Okay. Yeah.
What occurred to me when I heard about the loss of EGAL was two things. One was how welcome I felt when I first started coming to this group, which I would ascribe to him, but also that it was too late for me to communicate with him about what he had meant to me, but I realized it was not too late to communicate with my other friends about what they meant to me, and I have been trying to do that, and I'd like to suggest that the rest of you think about that.
I still have this quote open about people blaming him for things, and so it was better to be MC officially.
Yeah, if you're gonna, better to be slaughtered for a lion than for a lamb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Folks began incorrectly assuming I was somehow in charge. I've heard that from other people too.
Yeah.
What was it you said, that you started stacking chairs and suddenly people thought that you were running something?
Yeah.
This is leadership, folks.
And I kind of on the opposite angle, when EGAL showed up to the first Calligator code sprint, he had brought along very in-depth specs detailing every possible feature of this software that was like entirely planned out, and it did basically everything. Like tons of features that it has never needed, but it would have had. And in that process, there was more pushback of the, but we're running a crazy anarchist pirate ship, and we need to...
I have this theory. Yeah, and he preemptively registered domains, and I'm sad to say that his vote for Calligator's name didn't get taken. Well, no, not sad, because this one was my idea. But he wanted, or his idea was that it would be Caligori. Yeah. And yeah, he showed up, I mean, seriously prepared. Like, okay, if we're going to do this, this is how we can do it. And yeah, my wacky idea was that the process of having the code sprint was going to also create the design, and that we would collectively figure out what the best features were, and yeah, it worked out.
Does he own any domains that we need to worry about?
So Stonetown Syndicate is taking care of that stuff. That's the nonprofit that does Open Source Bridge and Barcamp and a lot of things like that. It costs money to register domains, so if you wanted to contribute to the Preserve eGals Domains Fund, you could take that. But yeah.
Should put it on the list how to do that.
Okay.
So we can raise some money.
Okay, yeah, so we took over all of his digital assets, including domain names, which is good because he was hosting Calligator still. Speaking of taking responsibility for things and not being willing to...
Also the PDX Ruby thing.
And also PDX Ruby,
yeah.
yeah. PDX Funk. Blake, yeah, we're hosting that, so if you want to take it, you should let us know.
Or if you want access to.
I wanted to ask if the other, have the other user groups done okay? Do they need any help?
Yeah, that's a good question. He sort of stopped participating in his own user groups. You may have noticed this. at the start of the year. So I know that groups have kind of been
Yeah,
stumbling through,
like
but
Jacob has been,
Yeah.
helping on the DevOps, and Leif with
Leif's
PDX
got-
phone,
Yeah.
been stepping up, but,
are there things that
might
either of you
need help,
Yeah.
so people want to help.
Yeah, and I know you've told me how to help, but can we tell everyone else how to get involved?
which part?
We haven't figured out the way, have we?
Well, so there's, if you really want to know the inner workings and contribute to that, there's getting on the PDX review business list. There's showing up at a business meeting when we have the next one, which is still to be determined, and if you have suggestions about that, the business list is a great place to contribute those. There's, generally this is a participatory group. So the meetings often kick off with a reminder that, you should speak up, you should ask questions, you should contribute things you know, you should suggest topics, you should offer to speak if you feel up to it. We're built on that. So there's kind of a list of things that, Chuck, you were working on, and there's some things on the website about how to participate in this group. I think it would be nice to flesh those out so that we give even more ideas for if you want to participate, here's things you can do. Especially now that we have a beginner group and we have Hack and Help, and there's more ways to be involved. Yeah.
I know it was suggested having a hackathon to go through projects that he was involved with and make sure everything's like merged together and that anything has a maintainer that.
Yeah. Well, so I really want to have a State of the Calligator meeting where we talk about what's going on with Calligator. ePDX, Citizenry's the open source project of it, could probably also benefit from something like that.
I would like to merge that with the State of the Calligator.
Okay, yeah. And then, one of the things that I think we noticed, Reed, was that Automated is kind of abandoned, isn't it? So it would be interesting to see if it's still useful, if it still makes sense to have a maintainer for it. There's not a lot going on with that now. Yeah.
Maybe gauge the activity on the list of people still asking about it.
Yeah, I think somebody told me that there was an email saying,
Yeah.
is this dead?
Is
Because
this-
nobody had replied in a while.
Right.
So, yeah. But, he really valued shipping complete and thorough finished things. So I'm sure that Automated does what it says, and that, if there are bugs recorded, that those bugs exist probably, so there would be something to start from if people were interested in that.
I know that we're running short on time, but I was one of the people who helped instigate the first Ruby Newbie evenings. And now I know that there's the Ruby Newbie things and the Hack and Help things, and honestly, I had assumed that they were all sort of the same thing. Does anybody know what the difference is, and can you talk about that? Because I've lost track.
I think Chuck maybe.
Sure, I can try and talk about it. So the only idea was that Ruby Newbie was really for integrating newbies and having a time when people could ask questions without worrying about I don't know, being passed down or something. But
that should be all of our meetings.
Yeah, I agree with that. And this group does pretty well with it, actually. This does.
Atmosphere.
That's true. This group does very well at that. But it was just, I think it's more of a group-based learning where Hack and Help was designed. I mean, Hack and Help was designed to be half hackathon, half help session, and just anyone can bring their project. It's turned into newbie Hack and Help.
Yeah.
But I think that's only because I've been involved, and I would.
And we could certainly publicize it more broadly.
Yeah. So it's designed to be all ages, all experience levels, and just open for whoever wants to hack or help.
Just looking at the attendance at some of those meetings, because there was a group that was looking for it, a couple of times now I've done, as you know, the Get Your Feet Wet with Rails kind of a thing, because that's something I got exposed to a year ago and still kind of remember. There's always 3 or 4 people at those meetings that want to do that. What I'm up against right now is I'd like to do a Vagrant setup so that we don't have to spend half the night getting Ruby and Rails installed for somebody before we can show them how to use it. But there certainly is a population of people who show up at those meetings and really like to find out what this is. So.
Good. We've been about half an hour. Okay. Anything else before we move on to the next bit? All right. Well then,
Okay.
thank you.
Marcus, you got 4 minutes.
Oh, come on.
Audrey, thank you, and I know a bunch of other people too for, taking over and make sure EGAL gets set up. It's a really important job.
How do you make that go away?
Everybody, especially me, appreciates that.
Yeah, it was really important to me to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's right. I do that.
And yeah, I'll try to figure out how to forward some of those older messages so that people can see them and
That's great.
enjoy.
One of the things that people discover when they start doing test-driven development is that no test is ever complete. No test suite covers all the cases. And the same thing is true with adages. So there's an adage in show business which is never go on after an act involving children or animals. And it doesn't mention anything about eulogies. But I'm feeling that perhaps this is an omission that should be included in a later version of that adage. So pardon me if I'm feeling a little bit awkward here, a little bit stiff. If it's showing, it's true. I'm feeling a little awkward, but let's go for it. Okay, so this came up in the real world. A list of a bunch of strings that are going to share a common prefix. The actual application is way too complicated and the details are way too boring to go into. Think of it as something like rsync, where you've got a whole bunch of things with these deeply nested paths, and you've got a chunk of them, and you're trying to find what's the largest containing thing that, or what's the closest containing thing that holds the most. You want the prefix of all of the strings. And the initial code, the obvious code to do it, was you take the first item, and then for each item in the list, you look at the 0th character, and while there is an ith character, and that ith character is the same as the answer you increment, till you find the first place where they differ. And then up to there is now your prefix. So as you go, you start with your first string as your prefix, and every time you have a difference, you shorten, and at the done, and you're done. Okay. So they were thinking, well, that can't be the coolest Ruby way to do it. Let's ask if there's a cooler Ruby way to do it. Unfortunately, I've been a little time constrained. I wasn't available, so instead they Googled and found on Stack Overflow this beauty. We take the data and we use inject S1 and S2, so we're taking the strings pairwise. And we're building a string with them and checking them against a regular expression. And what this does, okay, it's code golfing, it's shorter. So we have the 2 strings with a 0 character in them, and the strings are known to not contain a 0 because they're coming from C
Wait, is that 0 or null byte?
That's right, a 0 ASCII byte, a null byte.
Okay, null byte.
So a byte of 0, which is the ASCII null character.
There you
Okay.
go. Right.
Right. So then what they do is they say, from the start of the string, we want to match some number of characters, followed by some other number of characters, this, and then those same characters we saw here again. Okay? And this set of characters that we see in both is the result we want. So it takes them pairwise and goes chunk, 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 chunk. It is much cleverer than the first version. It's shorter and it's a little bit slower and a lot harder to understand. So they said, is there another way? And we don't really care about code length, but we like performance. We want to golf on other metrics. We want it to be easier to understand and faster. Okay? So I poked around for a bit, and I came up with one. I'm not going to tell you the whole thing, though. You're going to have to work for it. So the goal here is an order of magnitude faster. And I think the intent is clear. And it looks like that.
out that section.
You could erase your marks there and just use the.
No, because I don't have the
spacing.
The spacing.
It doesn't know how many
Wait,
characters it is.
Yeah.
Kirsten, can you just put a white thing up on the screen there?
Put a white thing up on
That would be easier.
Make your screen show just white.
Yeah, about
Go
Makes
into
sense.
GIMP, go into GIMP and open.
Or just unplug it.
Well, character turn at the character tab. What?
What?
New tab.
New tab.
Yes.
But that's going to give you.
And then.
And then you hide the thing.
blank.
Take the one down at the bottom right.
Blankspace.com.
There you go.
Hey, cool. About blank screen.
Or could just turn it off.
There's going to stay up there for 10 seconds.
A little homage to Egal's love of cats. Okay. Okay, so the normal hangman rules, ASCII characters, upper and lowercase r
How many
different.
hangmans we get?
What?
As many as it takes.
As we discussed before, and unfortunately this one, the ones with lots of blanks are hard for me and easy for you. It's the short ones that are harder for you. Okay, so does anybody have an ASCII character they like?
Lowercase x.
Oh.
Left curly brace.
Hold on a second. I want to make sure that there's only one of those.
Did you exhaust all the vowels in the?
Well, you could ask for you.
I don't know if they were exhausted, but they were panting by the time I was done. Okay, what was the
Left curly brace.
Left curly brace. Wow. Left curly brace.
Oh.
What? Huh. I don't need.
Lowercase s.
What?
Lowercase s.
Lowercase s.
Wow.
And actually, let's see if there's, yeah, that's the only one. Okay.
Lowercase m.
Oh, somebody gets the mother load. That's not as many as I thought they were. Okay.
Lowercase p?
Lowercase p. Okay.
Period.
Period.
Period's already exhausted.
Ooh, somebody's clever.
No.
Not necessarily.
There we go. Right.
Lowercase a.
Lowercase a.
Yeah, learning from experience. Yeah.
Okay.
You do put them all up there when we guess them, right?
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, yeah.
Left paren.
What?
Left paren.
Left paren.
Mm-hmm. That's good. And therefore, of course, right to right.
Okay, hold on. So let me get.
But not
Two
always.
A's.
Where there were
It wouldn't surprise me if they somehow
Right,
used
or
the
something
syntax
else.
error to make things work.
That's a good idea.
You're going to have to work on that.
I knew what I was getting into when I said that.
Okay, then right parenthesis. Okay, I apologize because I'm not the end. Sorry. Okay.
How about lowercase I?
Lowercase I.
I've been thinking of that too. Since there's some of those, there's one of those up there.
Well, what is it?
I see. Yeah. Usually of some sort.
Okay.
Some innumerable.
If there's a lowercase I. capitalized. Oh, wait, no, there's
Yeah,
another
there should
one.
be another one.
Lowercase
I'm
n.
pretty sure of that.
Lowercase n, yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
Colon?
What?
Colon?
Colon.
Oh, okay. What are punctuation characters coming?
Yeah. Yeah.
Ampersand.
Let's see, I need to see what we got. Ampersand.
Yeah.
I make my ampersands funny. I've done it all my life. It makes my handwriting look funny.
You choose the font.
Lowercase j.
Yeah, obviously we got O.
Yeah, let's see. Oh. Let's see, any other J's or O's? Okay.
Lowercase r.
Lowercase r.
Lowercase C. There we go.
Wait a second, let me, wait a second.
We need
Lowercase h.
Yeah. We need a D after.
Wait. And what was that I heard?
D.
D.
Lowercase D.
No D's, no.
Yeah, I want that, yeah. And it'll be U, obviously.
Yep, I think that's it. Okay.
Can I have a Q?
There we go.
Did you make a Q or a Q?
You sure you got all the lowercase u's?
What? Lowercase u.
Yeah, we had that already.
Oh, we did. Oh, shoot, I missed it. Yep.
Uh-huh.
This game is harder than I remember.
Yeah, especially when I keep moving them around out here.
Oh, that could be another puzzle.
Yeah.
Lowercase l.
Lowercase l.
Anagram on that.
Oh, that was an H. I don't know why it's not.
And that's an L, that thing?
Yeah, that's an L. To distinguish it
Different
from.
font.
Yeah, it's a different font. Yeah. Man, you guys, you can tease me on my handwriting all you want. Earlier in the week, I had a bunch of second and third graders talk to me about my zeros and my sevens.
Yeah.
Man, talk about a tough crowd. Oh. Okay.
Lowercase w?
Yep.
Mhm. I don't think you put all the E's in yet then.
Did you ask
I
for
don't know
me
if we
yet?
asked for you.
We are right now. Lower.
Okay, well, I'm asking. Yeah.
And then, wait, what do we do? Yeah, okay.
Oh, lowercase t?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a second. Somebody did, and I did not give you all your P's, by the way.
Lowercase c.
Lowercase k.
Z.
What?
Lowercase z.
Lowercase z.
And there's
Space.
Underbar.
Okay, there you go. Oh, no, one character left, one character left.
White space.
No?
Bang.
Whoa.
Oh, Question mark.
There we go. Okay.
Yes.
So, if we want to find the unique prefixes, let's imagine that these things were coming in sorted order. Well, first of all, let's say they're arbitrary order. If we had the common prefix, one thing we know is that any two strings we picked out of it should have that common prefix as a prefix of them. Supposing they were in sorted order, the first one and the last one should clearly have that common prefix. And the additional property is the first and the last one are the common prefix of them is going to perforce be the common prefix of the whole set. And because if any string differed earlier, then that different character would actually have to be lower, in which case it would have been the first, or higher, in which case it would have been the last.
Right.
So the first and the last string in a sorted list are the only two you have to look at to find the common prefix.
Because it's the largest difference.
And
Exactly
sorting,
the right way to say it.
right. Sorting is an expensive operation compared to min-max, which is ON. And it's given to us as a built-in in Ruby 2. So what we do is we go through, and actually that's in, I think all this is 1.9 actually. This does work in the 1.9 series. But unless further noted, by the way, I'm assuming at least Ruby 1.9, if not Ruby 2, and anyone who says that doesn't work on my Ruby is going to get teased. Okay, so what we do is we find the min-max. We've now got two strings. Okay, now we're interested in properties of the characters of this string, so we have this array of the first and the last that min-max gives us. So min-max, by the way, takes an enumeration and gives you the smallest and the largest element as an array. Then we map. For each of those elements, we apply chars to it. So now we have the arrays of chars. This array of chars, we zip. So now what we have is an array of pairs of chars. Okay? So the first one of each, the second one of each, the third one of each. Okay? And what we do is we map each of those things to only get the unique. So if the two characters happen to be the same, then we just only want one copy of them. If they're two, then they're two distinct. We take from that list while there's only one. We take the ones for which there's only one, and we join them together, and that's our prefix. It's an order of magnitude faster on my test data than the other approach.
But you're assuming that you don't have two characters that are the same in a row.
Two what?
Oh. If you have two characters that are the same in the row,
bookkeeper.
your one will...
No. Because if I have bookkeeper, if my strings are bookkeeper and bookmaker, let's say.
Yeah.
Can you diagram out the flow there?
Yeah, so, and let's say this is going to be my first and last. I might have other bookkeepers and stuff in the middle. These are my min-max. So when I map to characters, what happens is I now have this array. These are all strings, like whatever. This is all separate strings. And this is an array of strings. And actually, it's not an array, but it's an enumeration, which is minor. So anyway, I got these things. So then when I zip it, what I have is
Oh, look at that.
One more level of structure that keeps Yeah.
And so on. And then when I unique it, I get that, and that, and that. And I'm going to have the O and the K. No, I don't
The K
have
and
that.
the M are going
Yeah,
to
the
stay.
K. But
And the
here,
M is going to stay with it.
K and M.
Yeah.
This actually isn't a
So then, I come here and I take while one. So I'm going to take this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one, and I stop, and I join them. Get a book.
So this wouldn't continue after the KM?
No.
Because it doesn't satisfy the one.
All right, if it works, it's cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
And the nice thing about this is if you think about it, it's pretty clearly what you want to do. You want to look at the characters, and you want to find the prefix where there's only one character in that slot, and join them together. It turns out that if you want efficiency, there's an even faster way to do it.
We knew you'd come up with that.
That's left as an exercise for the reader, or the listener, or whatever. One thing I was thinking that somebody was going to call me on. What was I expecting to be called on?
Handwriting?
There's no ampersand there. Yes, reduce, and only reduce that I know of, will take a symbol and two-proc it for you. What? So you don't need the ampersand, and that's apparently by design.
Is that your performance improvement?
No, it doesn't make any performance difference put an ampersand there. And apparently there's some really clever reason that that's the way that way, but my Japanese isn't good enough to figure out what it is. But it's apparently like, why in the world was this? And then Japanese like, oh yeah, sure, clearly, obviously. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, I think it's just so it's more natural when you're saying inject in a method name rather than injecting a prop.
Right, but why not for map?
Yeah, map.
Why couldn't map do that also? Yeah.
I don't know.
Or take while, you know.
Yeah.
And leaf?
I just want to add the performance thing. Would, instead of doing map unique take while 1, just do a take while elements are equal?
Oh, take.
You don't have to zip it.
Take while they're.
You still need to zip it to get them lined
Yeah,
up.
that would take the map unique out, right?
What?
The zip, yes, but then skip
Right.
the map unique and just have a block of 2 that'll take the array and compare it.
Oh, take them while they're equal? That's performance neutral. I had actually had an earlier version that did that. But then it had curly braces, and I thought, no, they're going to guess curly braces. That's going to be one of my few things that I get them on, so I can't have curly braces. So, and actually, I'll give you a hint. The one that beats this on performance doesn't mess around with characters.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Okay. Ooh.
Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you.
Wow. PDX in various ways.
Yeah, I think most of you know me. A lot of you might not know my last name, Bill Denbesta. I went ahead and put my slides on the mailing list, and I put my source code up on GitHub in case anybody wants to look at it. Might be easier, especially when somebody can't see the code from the back of the room. I have an existing business. I should tell you that I'm not a software engineer by profession. At this point, I'm actually an electronics engineer. I do software for entertainment and for business reasons. I do electronic design consulting, and I build and sell electronics products in case anybody wants to buy any LEDs from me. They are packaged and sold in hobby shops and electronic stores.
Are you looking for Leslie's?
No. So I have a customer who is a hobby shop. And I have an existing business, as I said, and I already do business with hobby shops, so I already have business documents. And they look a certain way, and I'd kind of like to have them continue to look that way as I build my new website. I also have a son who is has some interesting issues and probably is not fully employable out in the real world, and I'd like to give him a full-time job running my business for me. So I'm going to build a B2B website to interface with my customers and also to run my business and to manage my son. So it does all the normal business activities, and then it does some internal things like, well, obviously it communicates with customers, and we need to send PDFs to customers for acknowledgement of orders and invoices. I give my customers 30 days to pay if they're a hobby shop, so I have to give them a monthly statement if they owe me money. Then there's a whole bunch of in-house kinds of things. So my son will get an email that says, we're getting low on this particular product, please build some more. Or there were 3 orders today that need to be pulled and shipped. And here's the shipping documentation that goes with that, including the labels and so on. And I get things like SMSs and emails that say, this customer would like to be approved to move from the retail pricing to the wholesale pricing, which I will respond to with SMS so that I can do it when I'm somewhere else other than in my office. As I said, I have a bunch of documents that I wanted to create, and I was looking for a solution to do this. My documents have a similar style. They all look like they came from the same company, so they all have the same stuff at the top. They all have the same footer. And unlike a document that I would create in something like a PageMaker or another layout tool of that kind, I have elastic content problems. I have short orders and long orders. I have short invoices, long invoices. So I need this elasticity. So I decided to look at how I could implement this. This is just a little bit more in detail of some of the things I'd like to have as features for my documents. Very specific customer information, tables with headers, you know, pretty much obvious stuff. So I looked around at several possible ways to generate PDFs, and I chose Prawn. You'll hear in a couple minutes about another alternative. The 3 things I thought were the biggest virtues of Prawn: 1, it's actively supported. 2, it looks like a page layout tool to me. It looks like what I was looking for to make these paper documents. And I've had a lot of experience with HTML and CSS, and I did not want to spend several months trying to figure out what the CSS looked like to coerce these things to look like my paper documents.
That's a good reason.
Yeah.
+1.
So I'll give you a little run through of what I think are the salient features of Prawn, and then I'll show you how I implemented my solution. We'll talk just very briefly about my source code, and then I'll tell you what I think in general. As I said, the Prawn API doesn't really deal with HTML, CSS. I was really relieved about that. It creates documents from abstract data. It does support this fluid notion of we don't know how many lines in our table we're going to have, so we can have some way of flowing over from page to page and so on. It implements a document coordinate system, which I'll show you in a minute. Prawn is a layer on top of PDF, which is a layer on top of PostScript, which I'm just curious how many, when we're talking about archaic and ancient languages, how many people except B and Marcus know PostScript? Yay!
I know it twice.
Yeah, yeah. I think PostScript is a fascinating language, and I think it's, I learned it right after I learned Forth, and so it was a very natural progression for me.
I would like to note that I'm working on a project with Marcus, and there are PostScript files in our Git repo.
Yay!
Yeah, that's the only way.
Yes, indeed. So Prawn implements some things on top of PostScript, including the notion of a cursor position. So we look at a Prawn document. The origin is in the lower left. Interestingly, you start to render from the upper left, and that means the cursor starts from some positive number, say 600 or 700 or something, and continues to decrement as you move down the page with your rendering. Nice for me, the default document size is letter, which is this many points, not pixels. 1/72 of an inch point. And there is a default margin box, which is a ½ an inch off of every side of the letter. And so when you start talking about coordinates of things that they're considered to be nested inside of the margin box, and your coordinate system is there. To lay out your page, there's some pretty important constructs that you probably want to use. One of them is that there's a repeat capability, which says, I'm going to describe something that I want to appear exactly the same way on every page, in the same place on every page. You can also use bounding boxes, which have an interesting property, which is that they support flow across pages. Bounding boxes can also be set so that they will clip or so that they will be stretchy. I think those are useless capabilities for what I'm doing. In fact, they're probably dangerous. I like flow. I like the fact that when you run out of space, a new page appears and you get to keep on going. This is kind of interesting. If you're doing something that has paragraphs of text, there's a way to do some grouping to say this collection of words that forms a paragraph I would have as a group so that I don't get any widows and orphans. And I can explicitly start some new pages if I want to. If I'm done with one part of my document and I want to begin another part of the document, there's a way to start a new section. So this is the part about flow that I was talking about. Here's a repeat block like a footer, looks the same in the same place every page. Of course, there might be some exceptions to looks the same, which I'll get to in a minute. But then we have bounding box, which if I fill it up, I automatically get another page with another bounding box, same size and shape, same location, and the text continues to render. And I wondered about this for a long time, and I finally found one of the things I'll say about prawn is the documentation is a little sketchy in some cases. I wondered how to do multi-column documents, and I finally found it in a pull request. Yeah. So there's another construct instead of a bounding box, which is called a column box, where you can define that I'm expecting to have some number of columns side by side, and what I want my overflow to do is to fill those boxes before it moves to the next page. That's better than nothing, but it's got some, both the bounding box flow from page to page and the column box flow from column to column and then to next page. They do some things automatically that you might not always want to have done, and I'm not quite sure how to get a hold of that, but I haven't got that problem at the moment. Back to overview for a moment. Prawn supports fonts in the true type manner, which means if you want a bold, you need a bold font. If you want italic, you need an italic font. Fortunately, it also supports inline styling. This isn't beautiful CSS or whatever, but it's sure a lot better than having to go try to find a bold font and an italic font and an italic bold font to go with your regular font, just so that you can have a little bit of bold text on your page. Text can be left, center, or right aligned, and now I want to remind people that this is built on top of PostScript, and the way PostScript works is you create a path which describes essentially the outline of all of the characters, and then that path is stroked later and filled later to actually render those characters. And in between creation of the path and the stroking of the path, there can be a translation, which is where is it and how is it oriented. That's how a line is implemented in this particular case. The path has been described, so we know the dimensions of this piece of text, so we know exactly how we need to reorient that to make it left aligned or right aligned. And again, PostScript has a huge number of really wonderful drawing constructs, all of which are exposed in prawn, none of which I need. The prawn documentation, there's sort of three different kinds of prawn documentation. I guess there's a README, which is just to kind of get you interested and suggest to you that it's relatively straightforward to do some things in prawn. And this covers a little bit more about installation and some of the structure of where you'll put your files and so on, which I'm going to cover. There is this document which is very self-congratulatory, which is on this page, about how wonderful this document is. And in fact, it does cover a lot of things, but it is somewhere between a reference document and a tutorial, and falls short in both cases.
Is that prawn? Isn't there a prawn 2 out there as well?
I honestly don't know.
think of lobster.
And then version of Ruby are you running?
193.
Okay.
There's a much more complete exposure of all of the APIs of Prawn as a function of the RubyDoc website, and that's pretty good if you're trying to figure out what parameters go with a particular call and so on, which I've had occasion to do. So as I said, it covers how the features work. There are some examples. There are no, if you want to do a business document, here's what you'd want to do, which is why I'm giving this presentation. So installing and using Prawn is really easy, just like a lot of other gems. Add it to your gem file and bundle it. You need a PDF folder alongside of your view folder, and that's where you're going to put things which are very much like templates. This is going to describe how a particular PDF document gets rendered, just like a template describes how a view is rendered. And then in a model or a controller somewhere, you're going to actually create a document and render the document with some parameters to say things like what the file name is going to be, what the file type is. Inline happens to mean put it in the browser. I don't remember what the other choices of this are. I think you can put it in a file, for example. And that's all that it takes in the controller to actually cause a document to come into existence. So again, I'll say something a little bit out of the line of this presentation. I have always enjoyed being in this group. It's a very welcoming group and a very helpful group. And I've gotten a lot of help even with this from various people. And one of the pieces of help that I got was that Jacob said, why don't you make a letterhead class? He might not remember that he said that, but so I did. I made a letterhead class, and then all my other documents are derived from the letterhead class. I'm going to use the inline formatting quite often in my code, or I knew I was going to do that, and so the default for inline was that it was turned off. So Jacob showed me how to override that in my base class so that inline is turned on in my documents. I implemented various constructs that are going to appear in many different kinds of documents, and I derive all of my documents from this letterhead. See if I can get to my code. So here's the top of the letterhead class. Here is the overriding the text function so that inline is turned on instead of turned off. I had never used super before, I had never used merge before, because those don't appear in controllers and models and so on. So here's an item which appears on pretty much every page, a corporate name. So I said it's going to be this tall, and we're going to start at wherever the cursor is. So that means it's going to be part of this flow of information, which happens to be at the top of the page. And I draw a bounding box. See this stroke bound, which is commented out now? I would recommend that you always start with that term, that you do that right after every bounding box. Then you're going to get all these nice rectangles on your page, and you can see why things aren't where you thought they were. So this particular text is going to be bright red, and it's the business name, and it's center aligned. And I didn't like the behavior of the cursor during that rendering process because it leaves the cursor kind of partway in the bounding box. My bounding box has got some margin inside of it essentially, and the cursor is now hanging in the wrong place. So I force move the cursor off the bottom of the bounding box. So this little piece of construct is now well behaved. I should say, by the way, if there are code trolls out there who want to tell me how to improve my code, I would love to have you do that. The penalty is going to be you're going to have to spend enough time with me to be able to get me to understand what you just said.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What is cursor, the location, is the cursor location just a horizontal, or just a vertical?
Yes, it is, interesting.
Okay.
That's one of the things which doesn't actually follow the PostScript very well.
Okay.
Yeah, you deal with horizontal positioning with the align capabilities, align right, align center, align left, given a certain vertical position, which is the cursor. Yeah, I don't love that, but it's, you know, that's the way it is, and it works okay. So I have some more constructs like this. I'm not sure that they're all particularly interesting. This one is interesting, though. Document footer has some stuff which is left aligned, which is what time it is right now as the document is being rendered, and some stuff which is right aligned, which is, this should have been the company name. I forgot to fix that as the environment variable. It should be the corporate name, which is right aligned. And there's some room in between. Oh, by the way, I noted where the cursor was. I rendered this. I moved the cursor back to the same place and rendered this with the opposite alignment. That's the PostScript way. Draw on top of yourself.
Yeah.
It's okay. I mean, it works well, and it's, you know, it's the right thing to do in this world. There's room in the middle for something else, but it's not something that, in fact, works in this same paradigm, which is what page number it is. So here's a derived document. Oops. Shouldn't have done that. One of these times I'll learn how to use this. I also have to apologize for the fact that this, I'm using Windows 7 reluctantly. It's the only software I have that knows about the HDMI port on this machine. So here's a derived document. So I start out with a big bounding box, which covers the entire page except for the place that the footer is going to be. And that bounding box, again, is going to automatically recreate itself on following pages to fill up the space. And then I do these things, a corporate name and a document title and the order information. And I wrote those in such a way that they behave correctly and they appear below each other. They manage the cursor properly so that they just, you know, fit against each other. And billing address and shipping address actually by default fit side by side. And then we get, I don't think this was a wise implementation choice, but it's the way it is. This number pages construct is like a repeat in some sense, except that it alters the text. It's not the same on every page, but the implication is that there is a page number on every page, although you can parameterize it to be, you can pass it a block even to describe whether or not you're on the right page or the left page, or if you want special treatment in the first half of the document instead of the second half, or whatever. And these are special variables available to me in Prawn. What's the current page that I'm on, and what's the total number of pages that this document contains? It's very important that you don't do this until after all of the paths of the document have been rendered, or else you don't know how many pages there are. And here's this repeat that I did before, which put it on all pages, put the footer on all pages.
Now, if you were close to filling a page, and you did number pages, and the page number pushed you over so that you'd have to take 2 pages, would that be a edge case, or?
I carefully avoided that in the following way.
Okay.
My bounding box does not occupy the entire margin box.
Okay.
And there's room at the bottom, 20 points tall.
And you don't expand.
And this is where I put this. In fact, this draws over the footer, only this is aligned center.
Right. Yeah.
So it's in the same vertical position as the rest of the footer, but it's not in the same horizontal position as the rest of the footer. Again, the PostScript way, draw all over yourself.
What, is there a reason you did the doc footer after that?
No.
Okay.
So either should
Not
work
particularly.
because they
Yeah, either way works,
within
but
the same space.
Because I would have drawn my whole document and then stuck in the page numbers.
Yeah.
I guess once you've set aside that much room, it's kind of safe to do.
It doesn't matter,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's some good fun, which is to render a table of items that somebody ordered and so on, and there's some interesting formatting that goes along with this. So I have an array here which specifies the widths, again in points, of the various columns of this array. The first row is bold. Some of these are aligned center, some of them are aligned right. Padding. This header true, we'll get to that in a minute. That means I want a header on every new page. When I flow over a page, I'd like another header. And then for the item rows, I have a list of row header names, essentially. And then I start fetching things out of a list of line items that I happen to have that go with this order. And I render those into the cells of the table for as many as there are. And then I happen to do some things that are very specific to this particular document, which is just to put some totals and so on at the bottom. But again, because I had managed the cursor position carefully, this always works. So this document looks like that. That looks pretty good to me. It looks a lot like what I've been printing for several years already.
Now, does the table logic put the header?
Yes.
The table header?
That was the header true.
Right. Right.
It says put one of those on in every new page render. Want me to go back to that?
No. I just.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I'm very satisfied with this, actually.
Nice job on your stuff. I'm also curious about that ambulance flasher and.
Yeah, we can come back to that if you like.
Curious about that. There's a lot of blinky lights in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of
there
cool
are.
stuff on that.
So, just to reiterate, if I was going to encourage somebody to do this, and essentially I am trying to encourage you to do this, I would go at this in this way. Define for yourself what a standard document looks like, and go ahead and create your own letterhead class for that. You saw how I managed the cursor position very explicitly and very carefully to keep different things away from each other. Start by stroking all the boxes so you can tell what's going on as you build this. Start, fill the boxes, set the fonts because that determines how big things are and how much acreage they take up. Check out your overflow behavior. So that means you need to have a short order and a super long order and look at the page, the pages that come out. You might have to work on your bounding boxes and then turn off the stroking and you're basically done.
So it looks to me like you want to override that bounding box class and have a setting on it that says stroke or don't stroke, so you don't have to have that in every single one.
It's a single line of code right after it. It's not that hard.
Not bugging you?
Not bothering me, really.
So actually, when I do similar things with PostScript, what I'll do is I'll have a help routine. I like to do light blue dotted lines. And if the debug flag or the show box flag is, it's light blue dotted and otherwise not.
Right.
And and then I just leave it in the code and I just adjust the flag
Right.
to do.
And the other thing, Sonia, is the PostScript way is render the path, then stroke it.
Yeah.
That's how you do everything in PostScript. So it doesn't bother me that it's 2 lines of code.
Well, this is Rails, so just like if Rails and development,
Okay, that's a good idea, but I'm just trying to say that's what my answer was, is it all was looking like PostScript. I flipped back into PostScript brain mode and I just did the work. And
It's not the 2 lines of code, it's that one of them is commented out.
yeah, okay. So anyway, here's what I have to say about prawn in the big picture. I think it's great for doing what I did. It worked very well for me. I wouldn't try to create web page hard copy with this. I think that's the reverse thing. I haven't talked about that, but trying to create web pages that look like documents is one thing I don't want to do. The other thing is trying to create pieces of paper that look like web pages. I think it's relatively mature. The code I never found a problem in the code. I think it's robust. I think it's relatively feature complete. I'm going to think very, very hard about overflow behavior and explicit versus automatic overflow behavior, because there's certain kinds of documents that I'm not sure you can get at the constructs for those. And I had a chance to talk over what I was going to talk about with Sam, and he pointed out to me that in one of his previous lives that they used prawn to render an entire catalog. And as I was going through this catalog, it's really interesting. I can guess what some of the kinds of structures were, because there are pages that look like they're just overflow of one to the next, and then there are pages which look like there's something special. But it's obviously pretty damn capable if you can accomplish this kind of activity. So
I will add that you do not want to find code for that catalog.
Yeah. So I have 2 more presentations I'd like to give at some future time that I've also learned about this. So just as a kind of a teaser, I'm using active shipping pretty successfully to. I wrote some code to estimate the size of the box and the weight of the box for a given order, and then I query UPS and FedEx and the post office and so on, and find out what they will charge to ship it, give the user a choice, and pick that choice. And I'm also in the middle of implementing Braintree, and I like it very much. And when I'm finished with that, I'll also talk about that. So thanks very much.
Cool.
Before we get started, I will pick a random number for the raffle winner. We have 7 entries.
Wow.
Okay, it's number
Your chances are
7,
good.
which is Rachel Sacre.
All right. Yay.
So I'll take care of getting your ticket sent to you. Thank you everyone for
Normally we tell people
entering.
to email user groups, but that's you.
That's me. So. I think, yeah. Join other user groups if you want another chance, because there are other rounds. I actually had something to add. I don't know if I could just display.
Yeah.
There's actually something else that I was just remembering. That you can do with prawn. I used prawn. Let's see if this works.
Kirsten, while you're setting up, did you want to mention the discount code for user group members?
Yes, I do. Is it OS Bug?
OS Bug Love.
Love.
OSBUGLUB.
Okay.
But if you misread the BUG, then yeah. That's how
OSB.
I wondered what that means.
We love bugs and open source.
Exactly.
Don't figure it out. There we go.
You might recognize this. I generate the OS Bridge badges with prawn.
Wait, why are they tilted like
Because when they hang from your neck, we
Yes.
want them to read straight up and down, and they hang at a 45-degree angle. Because we punch them in the corner.
So they're actually two rectangular stickers. It's a sheet of 6 stickers, and then we take the stickers and put one on each side, and then yeah. So I had to do a lot of trial and error. This I don't know if you want to see my code either, because it's but But yeah, it's kind
It
of
works.
messy.
It works.
But it works, yeah, a lot of trial and error. And then, let's see, yeah, down here, oh no, oh yeah, this is, so I call it, yeah, twice, one for the right and one for the left. And they're just different sets of coordinates. What was I going to show you up here? Yeah, I do a rotate to get the angle. And so there was many PDFs generated where things were just not printing on the thing at all.
Yeah, they were rotated off into...
Exactly, yeah. So finding the rotation and then the right coordinates and then, yeah, and then it's just like coloring the right color depending on what type of badge it is. And it also is it's kind of fun. It gets the data from Eventbrite, calls the Eventbrite API and figures out what kind of badge it is.
So I want to make a quick comment about this.
Yes.
At Waza, Heroku's developer conference, Rune Madsen gave a really cool talk on like generating graphic stuff programmatically.
Yeah.
So he kind of talked about processing and I guess using like processing through JRuby and stuff. But he, you know, if you is it
Flying saucer.
yeah, or like the soup cans.
Yeah.
What's his face's soup cans. Warhol.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right. So like you could. So if you imagine like giving that task to a developer and a designer might make it pixel perfect and then use some like copy paste kinds of things where a developer would come up with some type of algorithm to build it, right? And so what his theory was that if you have something that you can tweak very easily, like code, then it allows for more exploration. And so what's kind of cool with like processing and prawn and stuff like that is you get that from a visual point of view. There's something nice that is not just like an HTML file. Right?
Did he give the warning? The risks?
That.
Okay, so if you've never done this type of programming, you should know, and this goes for the PostScript too, time continues to pass in the outside world while you are playing with, wow, I could make them change from purple to lavender and rotate. Whoa, that is so, I wonder if I could phase that. Okay, oh, this is cool, I can have it be a sine wave and like, what, wait, I missed graduation, what? Yeah, it's amazing.
It is enticing,
alarm
yeah.
timers for your appointments.
But that happened to me years ago.
Are you still looking for more volunteers for OS Bridge?
We are always looking for volunteers for OS Bridge.
Yes. And sponsors as well, if people's companies were interested in sponsoring us.
It's true.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I forget now how much short of what we need we are. Didn't Christy say 21?
Christy said something, but yeah.
Yeah.
I should know this as treasurer.
Yeah, I've never received
One
the
day I'll
money
know
yet.
this. So, you ready?
I can, yes,
Okay.
I can present things. So,
Yay.
hi. Is it the right power is the question.
Yeah.
No.
See,
That's safe one.
yeah. All right. Let's see if that works.
Does your Mac Pro do the glitchy thing when you don't have the power plugged in too? I noticed that.
Yeah, that other machine was...
Yeah, I have that problem myself, but I don't think it's just my eyes.
This is interesting. Okay, well, I've had this happen before. And when this happened before, the solution was, unfortunately, to restart.
Installing this.
No. Okay, so I'm going to do that, and I'll be right back. With the restarting.
So I had a question for Bill and Prawn.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to troll you. I'm actually curious. Besides your eyeballs, is there any way to like test your output that you came across? Not that you necessarily need to.
Well, I know of some ways to do that I didn't come across. Okay. Yeah. There are ways to extract the PostScript out of the PDF and actually look at the code, and it has the coordinates in it. Okay. It has, it has the very explicitly has transforms and then path renderings and then strokings and fills and so on, and you can just see, down at the level of the PostScript, did it put the stuff where I told it to put it? But that's not necessarily something I know how to implement in say in a Rails test environment.
Yeah,
I don't have any idea.
Just curious.
And you're not wanting to test that its code did what it said it was going to do. You're wanting to test that your code did what it said it was going to do. And so
You want to make a fixture,
yeah.
right? And then you want to like shell both of them, your output and the fixture.
Maybe. I was actually going to suggest rendering a thumbnail image, like a low-res GIF or something, and then comparing those. But a SHA would be a faster way of doing that.
There's going to get some weird header.
Yeah.
Well, no, there are some. Mike Herman wrote a blog post about like a tool that you use to actually compare images. So you could say like, if this image is 10%, less than 10% different than this image, then like that's okay. Or that's
There's a tool called
I'm not sure. What does it mean to be 10% different with a purchase order like the one that was up there?
Yeah.
It's probably way too big of an error, actually.
It was just 2 zeros.
GhostScript has hooks.
Yeah.
So you could render the PDF using GhostScript and write a whole, it would be very complicated. You could conceivably do
that's a lot like what I was suggesting. Yeah.
And you could see what it's actually rendering. It would be very surprising.
In terms of like line items, you could check for text in the output.
I'm trying to get
the text is in the
Actually, so some say GhostScript hooks.
I can use the other one too.
PostScript
Well, this one I don't think actually.
Yes, it is.
Right, so
You could write a fixture in PostScript.
You could write the fixture in PostScript and have it log stuff. You could write tests that would go through and say, okay, write pass fail or whatever on each of these things out.
Absolutely.
I mean, it has conditionals and it's a language. It's a full.
It's an incredibly rich language.
Yeah. So you just write them, and you as a benefit, people learn PostScript.
That's what.
So here's
I've seen your crazy SQL graphics talks.
No, PostScript is really, really fun. If I actually need some relaxation, that is my go-to language for fun.
I think it's pretty
So who's going to write
recreational.
the cucumber driver for this?
I have actually. Hey, Marcus.
And I see here's my run from language.
Marcus, I have laid out circuit boards by writing a PostScript program.
Okay, I have done a ray tracing thing that draws gas giants and ray traces in PostScript.
So there is indeed an example of the back.
So read.
Yeah. Oh, we're back. Okay.
Well, we seem to be somewhat back. Let's see here.
It's Peter, isn't it?
Yes, he has a badge.
Oh.
Yes.
That is why he's sitting there. All right, let me just quickly see about resurrecting this browser. And okay, well, I'll be going a little bit more by the seat of my pants than I thought because all that context that I set up didn't work. But here we are. So I'm here to talk about PDFKit, which is another way of generating PDFs, and it is sort of a entirely different approach. So as Bill said, he chose this method that he used because it didn't require him to use HTML and CSS. Well, I really like HTML and CSS and can recreate print documents in it much faster than I can in something PostScripty. That said, there are some definite disadvantages and advantages to this method. So what PDFKit does is it uses WebKit to turn HTML and CSS into PDF documents. And WebKit is the open source project that is the rendering engine behind Safari. It's also basically the rendering engine behind Chrome, though Google just forked it and they're doing their own special magical pixie fork.
Googliness.
Yes. And so WebKit is a rendering engine. And as you can see, it does things like render web pages. Well, it has this other very useful feature that they had to implement. It's a print button. And because they had to implement printing, as it turns out, within this web rendering engine, there is all of the code needed to take HTML and render it as PDFs. So to get started, you have to install a thing called WK-HTML to PDF. And what this is this is the core, this is the tool that actually does the real work. It's a command line tool that all of these tools that do this work, PDF Kit and Wicked PDF and a couple of other ones, all use to actually do the work. They pass the HTML to this thing. One thing to note about this, if the browser would not be crashing, then we will use the other browser. So WK-HTML to PDF is has a whole bunch of downloads here, and you can also install it from various package managers. You can install it using Homebrew. You can install it using apt. It is relatively important to use the binaries that they provide, because if you look at their README file, it has this nice section that says, here are all the features that are only supported if you build it against their patched version of Qt. And cloning their patched version of Qt using Git takes several hours because it's Qt. So you probably don't want to build this yourself, though you can if you want to. And a couple of sort of important features that I'll touch on later are only accessible via this Qt patch. And so their binaries are the best way to do that.
Like running without X, so on pretty much any server.
Right, running without X on pretty much any server, things like that. So if I run WK-HTML to PDF right now, and I say help, it'll say, if you scroll up here, this one, it'll explicitly say in the description, not using the patched Qt, because this is the version that I installed from package management that just does not have it. If you download the version from their thing, it will be somewhat annoying, at least on the Mac version, because it didn't run yet. It's packaged within an app package that looks like an app you could double click but does not actually do anything when you do so, and you have to dig around inside of that bundle to get to the actual command line tool and run it. I'll touch on that later. But you need to install WK-HTML to PDFs, and you really want to use the binary distribution. And then you can install PDF Kit, which is really simple because it's just a gem that wraps this thing. A simple hello world is like this. You tell it where to find WK-HTML to PDF if you're not using a system-wide install, and then you initialize it with some text or some HTML, and you can say, print this out to file. And that will generate a file that says hello world and will work just fine. So all you needed to do was put text in a PDF. This is as far as you need to go. But there's a lot farther that you can go. It also implements rack middleware, which you can put in front of any Rails app or other Ruby rack app, and it will make the request to your app server, generate the request, and come back with a PDF. And the way that this works is anytime that you append .pdf to the end of your request, it will kick in and do this. You can use regular expressions to say, I only want to allow people to generate PDFs at this path, which is useful when you don't want PDFs everywhere, because it actually does take a decent amount of work for it to generate a PDF. I'll just do a quick demo of this. Let's see here, it should work.
Invoice Wombat?
Invoice Wombat is my premium invoicing solution. And you'll note that I started this using Unicorn, and that's a good time to come back here and note the thread alert. If you are running a single threaded development server, this will cause your server to hang because it's going to do things like request the page and then request all the CSS on the page, and there's only one thread, and it's still processing that first request that you made, and it's just going to sit there. So you need to run some kind of a multi-threaded server for development purposes when you're using this middleware. So let's come over here and let's...
Like Thin.
Like Thin, or any other thing than WebRick, which...
No, WebRick is multi-threaded.
But you have to pass option.
Thin is not.
Okay.
The Thin 2, or whatever the next version, might have some stuff into it, but yes, thick. They might support a couple of threads. Unicorn, multi-worker, so you can have multiple requests at the same time, so it'll still work, but it's generally not multi-threaded.
Right.
Puma kind of takes care of all of it.
Yes. I actually tried using Puma and could not get it to work in this particular case. But so I have generated a Invoice Wombat, which is a simple invoicing system, and I have tried to mimic Bill's output format for his invoices. So let me go and quickly make sure that I re-enable all of the style sheets. So, okay, so they're currently disabled. So if we go and look at an invoice in this system, nothing. We'll see an invoice, and it kind of looks really, really vaguely like one of Bill's invoices, though it doesn't have any styles at the moment. And if I say drop a.pdf on the end, it will sit and churn away a little bit, and it should, at some point, give me a PDF. Yeah, live demo time? No. That's what was working earlier.
So is Bill, how long does Bill's take? Because it seems to me that doing it with a PostScript, matching the semantics, that should be a lot faster.
It should be a lot faster. This is actually not that slow. This is an anomalous amount of time for this to be taking, and I have no idea why it is actually doing what it is doing at the moment. So the demo may be failing. Yeah. Oh.
It's making it up.
Oh.
Did preview.
Something strange is happening here. Something very strange is happening here. And this is what I get for restarting right before the demo. So, this thing works, I swear. But I'll move on to things. So you can, starting with something like this, which is a fairly simple HTML representation of an invoice, you can throw a few style sheets at it, and then it starts looking more like what Bill's invoice looks like. And then you can throw a little shim around it that only applies when you're viewing it on screen and not when you're printing. And then it looks more like a paper document. And from there...
So you use the screen media type to define your print styles?
I used the screen media type to define a simulated page that...
Will then become a PDF.
Well, the point being, the only thing that the screen media types define, and I'll get to that later, is the gray background and the box shadow on the page and things like that, and the size of the...
Oh, you actually created that, okay.
Yes, that's not a PDF.
Right, okay.
It just
says
makes you think.
but it says not PDF.
Well, now it does, because I just did it. But, so we're going to see if I can get that working again. But let's pretend that we were trying to do a live demo. The other things that you can do with this, in addition to running it through the rack middleware, is doing standalone rendering, where you are running some kind of rake task. You do all of your rendering to an HTML string, and then you can, very similar to the Hello World demo, but you can also manually add in style sheets to the PDF context that it'll inject before it renders, which is useful when all you're doing is rendering a little fragment of HTML. The other thing about standalone rendering is that you have to use absolute paths when you're rendering a block of HTML. You can't, you're not running this off of an app server. You can't use relative paths, or you can't use paths that start with / and expect those to be your document root. You have to actually have file system paths. And so it's often useful to have some kind of a flag that you pass in when you're doing the rendering that says, I'm rendering this HTML for PDF purposes, so tag on whatever the asset root should be, because you actually need those to be there. So a few tips and tricks for working with this thing. Look at WKHTML to PDFs extended help. It had lots and lots and lots of command line flags, and those are the flags that are sort of reified as PDF kits options that you hand it when you're initializing a new object. And you should know how they work. CSS has lots of nifty print features. So because you're designing things for print, you could use all of those things that you would never use when you're doing stuff for the web. Like physical units. You can use inches, you can use centimeters, you can use points, you can use picas. They're all there and they all work. You can use media types. If you pass in the print media type true option to PDF kit when you're initializing it, it will render your pages using the print media type, which is the same thing that your browser would use when it was printing a document. And this lets you make things behave slightly differently when you're viewing it on screen, print, and it lets you do more specific targeting. And so this is what I was doing before. I have all of the styles sort of in a all media type, which will be used everywhere. And that's where I define all of the actual layout. And then I define some screen styles to make it look good on screen and make it sized correctly on screen for viewing. And then if I need to do any print stuff, you could put that in another print-specific section as well. This print media type option is one of the things that you don't get unless you have the patched Qt build. And so that's one of the things that makes it really important. You can specify how page breaks should work using the page break before, after, and inside properties. Before and after, you can say like always or never or things like that. And inside, we'll try to avoid straddling the page boundary with that block that you've rendered. So it's a good way to push that thing onto the next page or keep it from straddling a boundary that you don't want it to.
What is the unit that those operate on? Is it like a paragraph?
It is any block element.
It's your CSS block scope.
Yeah. So these are just CSS properties that you can set on some block element and say.
So you could do a table row, for instance, but you couldn't. It'd be hard to mimic the behavior that Bill had with getting the new set of headers on each page.
Yes, and I'll touch on that later.
Okay.
Well, that's definitely true. You can use web fonts and vector images and fun things like that, because especially when you're rendering a standalone context and you don't care about people viewing this on the web and then getting a PDF copy of it as well, you really only have to worry about one browser, and it's this weird headless copy of WebKit that you're running, which means things like PDF and SVGs, they work just fine if you stick them in image tags and use them as the source of the image tag. TrueType and OpenType fonts seem to work the best in terms of this thing working, especially across platforms. I've used this on Linux servers and on Mac laptops and other sorts of things, and those seem to work the best, but I don't have that much to back that up at this point. You can automatically generate an outline for your PDF, so your header tags will automatically get converted into PDF bookmarks, which can be used for navigation. And this is mostly useful in terms of long, complex text documents or books or publications or things like that. It's less useful for one-page business documents. And you can set the outline depth option to limit the depth, so it will just discard anything below H4, for example. Beware of smart shrinking. So WebKit will try to shrink your content if it's too wide for the page to make it not too wide for the page anymore. And if you really, really care about how tall something is or exactly what size something is that you're trying to get on paper, this will screw things up. So you can disable it. And this is another thing that you have to have the patched Qt build or it will not work. And it could be nice to explicitly define your pages. You don't have to. You can just have a giant, long, flowing document, and it will paginate it in the same way that your browser would when you were printing it. And you can do all the things with tweaking page breaks and such. You can also explicitly just define page divs and lay them out in the same way that you would if you're using a page layout program. So if you're doing this, it seems to be safer to define those divs as being sort of like a 7 by 10 thing, and then explicitly passing margins to PDFKit rather than taking a 8.5 by 11 div and handing it to it. It doesn't seem, when you tell it to use no margins, it sometimes does weird shrinking things anyway, and that's something to be wary of. You can define, this is what I was talking about before, you can define a few screen styles just for in-browser previewing, and these just say, make the body dark gray, here's what a page looks like, and here we're saying give it a margin and padding just to make it look right. And these margin settings here won't get applied to the print document because these are only for screen, and so your print document gets its margins defined by passing arguments into PDFKit, and your on-screen fake page gets its margins defined here in CSS. Elastic content can still be hard. In fact, I would argue that Prawn does a better job of elastic content than this does. Even with table header tags, which are supposed to repeat on every page, they don't always. And so you can try to do math to split your tables apart into multiple things when you render them, but that implies that you know the height of all the items that you're rendering, which you might not because you have dynamic content, which is why it's useful that you can run JavaScript. So you can run JavaScript on the pages before they're actually turned into PDFs.
Is this supposed to make me feel better?
Probably. So the useful things about this, and the thing that I've actually used this for, was implementing elastic content across pages. I determined that I could figure out whether or not a table was overflowing the bounds that I wanted it to have. And then I could just run a loop and say, while it's overflowing, pull items off of the bottom of it and put them onto subsequent pages. And this worked fine. And so it's kind of interesting the way that this works. You can either say, I'm going to give you a certain number of milliseconds to finish running the JavaScript by setting the JavaScript delay option. Or you can say, give it the window status option, and then you just have your JavaScript code set window.status to some predefined string, and when it detects that that has been set, it will snapshot the page and render it to PDF. You can also pass things into the run script option, which will execute JavaScript that wasn't actually part of your page. You can just inject that in and it will run before rendering is executed. It has, WKHTML to PDF has a really nifty debug JavaScript flag, which basically just gives you the output of your JavaScript console in your actual console when you run it. PDFKit actually hides this output explicitly and doesn't show it to you. And I want to...
It doesn't give you an option?
It does not currently give you an option. I am thinking about submitting a patch to them. Wicked PDF is another PDF generation library that works very similarly to PDFKit, and that's the one that I've used in the past and have patched to support this, but it can be. But yes, that is a very brief overview of PDFKit, and I will take questions and see if the PDF that I told it to render ever rendered. It didn't. Oh, why is it going to localhost.com? That's
exciting.
Anyway. Yes?
So obviously using the rack middleware might, cause performance issues for your site depending on a couple of factors.
Yes.
If you wanted to instead render, you receive a request for a PDF and you want to hand it off to a background worker to render it, would you, knowing what you know, would you favor letting it grab CSS and stuff from the server, or would you do the thing where you pass in flat files of assets?
I would probably, it will probably be easier to, depending on how your app is structured, it will probably be easier to just do the flat file thing where you hand it all of the assets that it needs as file paths, if they're all there. If they're not all there, if they're assets that have to be pulled off of S3, if there's other sorts of consequences that have to come out, then having it go and grab a URL that you specified is certainly an option. There are a whole bunch of options that you can pass to the underlying binary to deal with authentication and things like that. It supports doing basic auth. It supports handing it a file that contains cookies so that it can reuse them. It supports several other things for actually negotiating to get into an authenticated state.
And then the other one's kind of just purely a CSS question. I just saw your CSS code. What does the media type all do? And I'm a hack at CSS, so I always put the rules outside of any scope and then use like media print for print specific styles. Does that actually give you any advantage to put it inside that all scope that you had?
So I'm not absolutely sure. My inkling is that some browsers, when they print things, will discard things that are not. Some browsers discard things that aren't in any media type incorrectly, or at least they used to. And I'm not sure if that still matters. So it's mostly just a habit. It's also whenever I am using media types, I like to have everything in one. But
yeah, chances are I'm doing it.
Went to localhost.com.
Yeah.
So other than the overflow page issue you brought up, are there any other factors that you both you got, Bill, and you read that you'd use to choose one or the other approaches?
I think the main factors that I have for using this are simply that there have been cases where the types of dynamic content that I've wanted to be putting into PDFs are things that I know very clearly how to implement in HTML, and I don't happen to know how to implement them as quickly in Prawn. I think that the other goals that I've had in the past when implementing stuff like this is being able to have sort of existing designers who are familiar with HTML and CSS being able to update these documents when changes have to be made instead of having them need to learn new systems. I think that overall, Prawn works better if you're going to have one person maintaining the code and that person understands how Prawn works and wants to get behind that mindset. But I think that sort of the maintainability advantages are somewhat substantial.
I've done a little bit of work with Prawn. It was a couple of years ago, but at the time there was not very good font support. So there was, you could forget if it embedded fonts or not, but it definitely didn't know any OpenType. So if you're doing any really fancy typography, not that your code would be on the web, but I think Prawn is not such a good choice. And it seems like PDFKit might handle that stuff a little better, just because it's keeping up with WebKit, which.
So how is it doing the fonts? Because it seems like Prawn should be able to do any font that PDF could do, right? Because it seems like a much more direct to the PDF.
Well, the problem that I saw was that it really only knows about TrueType fonts. Prawn does.
Okay.
You might be able to convince it to do other things, but if you've got an external font on disk, not a built-in font, then it's it's a file format of some sort. If it's TrueType, that's okay, and it will read the TrueType kerning tables, for example, but it won't read the OpenType substitution tables and position tables, which means if you're doing, especially if you're doing like non-Latin scripts, that's where it really gets complicated, and that's where Probably. I mean, I'm sort of assuming here, but I would assume that PDF probably is better at that. So if you're using standard stuff like this, where it's all pretty much straight up, almost ASCII, a little bit of Unicode, no embedded fonts, no fancy positioning, then Fun looks fine.
Do you know if it's doing the fonts as fonts or if it's drawing pictures of them, or?
It's.
Have you looked at what your team? What?
I think it actually draws pictures.
So it's basically what it's doing is it's taking the image of what it would have done on the screen and putting that in the PDF as an image.
Wait, which one are you talking
about? The PDF kit. Yeah.
I'm not positive about that.
Should be able to test if you get an output and just select it. Yeah, it's text.
It is text.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. It is actually doing the response.
But would you do non-standard fonts, or would you?
No, I believe it's embedding them properly. Part of the reason why, one of the other reasons why this is a decent, why WebKit is a decent choice for doing this is because it was built for the macOS rendering stack, and all of the OS's rendering is PDF natively.
Right.
So,
so somebody else has done the heavy lifting.
Somebody else has done the heavy lifting. The stuff that it's displaying to you on screen is actually being rendered with PDF things, and it's doing a subset of that to get it out to print. It did generate a PDF just now.
Tip tap, no live demos.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially following animals, children, or eulogies.
Exactly.
Thanks, Reed.
Cool.
Do you have anything else? I don't think so.
Yeah. Anybody else have any announcements or anything? And we usually meet for beer. I don't actually know where we're going to meet for beer. I mean, there's
Bailey's is conveniently
Bailey's
located.
is very
Oh, yeah.
conveniently
Bailey's
located,
is
so
there.
I think we'll probably go there.
Really crowded.
Very crowded. Yes.
They also have
Rialto?
They also have the space and pool tables.
Yeah. Well, we could go there. Yeah. Rialto. I don't know. Both. Try Bailey's.
Bailey's first.
And then see.
It's crowded.
Okay. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Try Bailey's.